It's 1998, a Saturday morning, but this is not a normal weekend, because today, you're finally going to see the Rugrat movie. Before you leave for the cinema, however, you decide to tune into Nickelodeon while eating breakfast, and an episode is actually airing right now. You finish your big bowl of cereal, and it's time to go. The big event is here. You buy your snacks, grab a drink, and sit down to watch as the introductory commercials from Nickelodeon begin. A short for Cat Dog plays, Nickelodeon's next major investment into getting the next big hit of two charmingly ridiculous characters like Ren and Stimpy. After ordering 40 episodes, they were confident that this physical, gag-filled cartoon would take off, as the premise of cat and dog being tied together already raises more questions. While Nickelodeon was flying high with Hey Arnold, Rugrats, and many more new animated ventures in the works, something was brewing in the background. A man by the name of Steven Hillenburg, though always passionate about art, chose to study marine biology. After graduation, in 1984 he started his professional career as an instructor at the Orange County Marine Institute, now known as simply the Ocean Institute. While working there, he drew informative picture books featuring tidepool animals, titled The Intertidal Zone. This comic book featured various sea creatures like the sea star, barnacles, and notably, a sponge by the name of Bob. After realizing that his true passion lies in art, he decided to switch career paths to something that would allow for more creativity. So in 1989, 2 years after leaving teaching, Hillenburg enrolled at the California Institute of Arts to pursue a degree in animation. While studying, Hillenburg already got 2 successful animated shorts under his belt, those being Wormholes and The Green Beret. In his thesis short film Wormholes, Hillenburg attempted to depict relativity in a poetic and easily comprehensible manner. It was at this screening where Hillenburg met Joe Murray, the creator of Rocko's Modern Life, who was looking for directors for his new series. Murray was so impressed with the style and storytelling of Wormholes that Hillenburg landed the job in Nickelodeon, working alongside Murray on Rocko's Modern Life. In 1984, while at Nickelodeon, Hillenburg went back to his roots and started to develop the Intertidal Zone characters and concept for his own series. After many incarnations of the sponge, the star was born. SpongeBob. With a core idea, it was time to put together a pitch for the show, so Hillenburg recruited Derek Drymon and Nick Jennings, both of which worked alongside Steven himself on Rocko's Modern Life. The trio then developed the pitch bible they'd use along with a rough version of the theme song, an underwater terrarium with models of the characters, and various other assets to use in their pitch. When meeting the executives, Hillenburg fully committed to the pitch, even donning a Hawaiian shirt. He acted out the characters in the scenes, did the voices, sound effects, and even illustrated the action scenes. Following the presentation, the Nickelodeon executives apparently even had to step out of the room just to get a breather from laughing so much. But ultimately, they were very impressed with how well this world was already thought out. Hillenburg's idea was approved and greenlit for 13 episodes. SpongeBob SquarePants was born.
It's SpongeBob SquarePants!
Hey, everybody!
Nickelodeon's newest, spongiest, square-pantsiest Nicktoon!
Pretty cool, huh?
SpongeBob SquarePants! Only on the best place to...
Within a month on air, SpongeBob overtook Pokemon as the highest rated Saturday morning cartoon on TV. 2 years later, the series had become a staple for Nickelodeon. However, it was still sitting at number 2 for the highest rated children's program, after Nickelodeon owns Rugrats. Things got interesting when the company realized that this eccentric sponge had drawn in quite a significant adult audience too. In fact, nearly 40% of its viewers at that point were actually aged 18 to 34. In reaction to this, SpongeBob was also given time slots for 6 and 8 p.m. throughout the week, unlike the Saturday morning time slot it had up until then. This turned out to be the perfect catalyst for SpongeBob's growth, as by the end of 2001, SpongeBob SquarePants now had the highest ratings for any children's series on all of television, still boasting a very substantial adult audience as well. This appeal to all ages is one of the factors that allowed SpongeBob's incredible growth. The early seasons of SpongeBob were not only perfect for children, but also their parents watching alongside them, as the episodes always had plenty of hidden humor for the adults as well. While other animated shows with plenty of adult humor were already on air, notably The Simpsons and South Park, SpongeBob had a much different appeal than the more edgier humor of its rivals. On the other hand, the innuendos flying over children's heads still made it entertaining for adults, allowing it to surpass the exclusively younger audiences of shows like Pokemon. But just like with SpongeBob a few years back, something was happening behind the scenes at Nickelodeon. A new show by the name of Fairly OddParents was picked up by Nickelodeon in 2001, because of the success of its shorts from just a few years ago. This was Butch Hartman's first major success story, which later led him to the creation of Danny Phantom, another show for Nickelodeon. While opinion on Hartman nowadays is very much split, in the early days of the Fairly OddParents, he along with the series itself were praised for this new take on the classic story of a kid being granted wishes and later realizing that they just want everything to go back to normal. Just like SpongeBob, the Fairly OddParents was an episodic series where continuity wasn't the main focus. Instead, it just wanted to tell a compelling, self-encompassed story for each episode. Upon its premiere, the show was immensely popular and became the second highest rated program among kids, behind the Sponge himself. During mid-2003, it did so well that it even managed to surpass SpongeBob for a little while. Ultimately though, SpongeBob's appeal to a much wider audience proved more successful, and despite having a consistent adult audience as well, the Fairly OddParents returned to the number 2 position. With multiple cancellations and renewals, the ongoing story of this animated comedy was full of trials and tribulations. But it did prove one thing: SpongeBob SquarePants was here for good. Even if it lost its number 1 spot for a little while, it would outlast anything you threw at it. And so, the era of SpongeBob began. It is needless to say that with the incredible success of the first 2 seasons, Nickelodeon wanted to increase the amount of content around SpongeBob, so talks of a movie special were thrown around. Despite turning down the offer multiple times, Hillenburg finally accepted an offer for a film adaptation in 2002.
Deep beneath the world's greatest ocean lives a sponge unlike any other.
Originally, this production was intended as the series finale, so after the movie was finalized, Steven resigned as the series showrunner. But because Nickelodeon was keen on continuing to produce episodes, he remained as an advisor, reviewing every episode after season 3. And while it may have been thought of as a finale originally, that was far from what actually happened, because the brand only kept on growing.
SpongeBob SquarePants Pal is in your Big Kids meal. They're dry, they're wet, they spout about. You can collect all 7 SpongeBob Pals only at Burger King, home of the real Big Kids meal.
As soon as 2001, SpongeBob's adventures were adapted for various game consoles, with the most notable being the Battle for Bikini Bottom, releasing in 2003. While new video game installments are still being released to this day, this is the one that has defined SpongeBob games for decades now, with the remaster of the original being released in 2020. It still boasts a very dedicated casual and even speedrunning community that has dedicated thousands of hours to exploring every nook and cranny of this game.
He's the top show on a top cable channel running several times a day.
In 2003, SpongeBob made his way into various amusement parks all over the world, with both rides and live performances. Numerous parks decorated whole sections to look, sound, and feel like Bikini Bottom you all know and love. And it wasn't just roller coasters. Because of its theme, SpongeBob took over whole water parks as well, with countless slides being themed around Bikini Bottom. Stores would also play music from the show, characters would walk around the parks, food items were themed around the Krusty Krab, and so on. On the note of merchandise, the famous sponge was plastered on anything and everything you can imagine. Shirts, bags, board games, shoes, socks, clocks, whatever this is, toys, waffle makers, cutlery, toothbrushes, toasters, DVD players. And merchandise wasn't just limited to simple items. The food industry also saw an influx of regular products marketed with the stars of Bikini Bottom. Anything and everything that could be made was sold. Various restaurants would also leverage the power of this marketing giant, using limited time collectibles, meals or drinks with nods to the show, decorating their establishments around the show, and so on. You may have heard about the infamous inflatable SpongeBob incident and how the 9-foot mascot was stolen. People were just going crazy over this charmingly annoying yellow sponge.
You'll need new pens.
Those guys must work out. I think they're in my spin class.
With the continued growth of the franchise, a second movie was also made, titled Sponge Out of Water. Non-surprisingly, it was another box office success, making over $325 million against its only $60 to $74 million budget. As you'd expect, a new movie came with another whole new line of merchandise and another marketing push that would no doubt increase interest in the franchise as a whole. During the summer of 2016, SpongeBob SquarePants the Broadway musical premiered, which was once again a success, winning multiple rewards and getting mostly positive reviews from critics. In 2018, however, the creator of the franchise, Steven Hillenburg, passed away due to ALS. Even after being diagnosed in 2017, Hillenburg stated that he would continue to work on the series as long as he could. Despite his tragic passing, the world and the characters he created would carry on his legacy. A third movie, largely meant as an homage to Hillenburg, was also produced and released in 2020, once again featuring cameos from very well-known actors. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, plans for a theatrical release were changed, however, so the marketing for the third installment of SpongeBob's Adventures on the big screen were fairly lackluster. Despite the odd release schedule, with the movie being unavailable in many countries for months after the initial release, it still saw fairly positive reviews and is thought to be a moderate success. In addition to the third movie, multiple spin-off shows set in Bikini Bottom have also been announced, the most prominent being Camp Coral, being a prequel series, telling the story of the early years of SpongeBob and his friends in Bikini Bottom. A Patrick Star talk show was also announced to be in development, with an initial order of 13 episodes. And lastly, there have also been untitled streaming projects related to the franchise, but none have been made public at the time of writing. But going back to the early 2000s, how did this world phenomenon impact Nickelodeon as a network? As established previously, SpongeBob started off as just a Saturday morning time slot, but in response to its success, it was given regular evening time slots throughout the week. This of course meant that something had to be replaced. It was the beginning of SpongeBob becoming the staple for regular programming. After some digging through some archived schedules, the numbers speak for themselves. Where there was demand, Nickelodeon was happy to fulfill it and give SpongeBob more and more time slots. This would of course depend on the region, but by 2010, having even 16 episodes throughout the day was not surprising. This immense success and ever-increasing share of the channel, not surprisingly, started to affect other programming on Nickelodeon, which started to turn people's opinions on the network. Discussion around this topic is very complicated, as opinions are split on who's to blame. While some blame SpongeBob itself, it's clear that this simply happened to be the successful enough cartoon for Nickelodeon to try and shape their every financial decision around it. If you remember the very beginning of the video, Nickelodeon's big investment into CatDog. This is the first major show that is considered to be pushed aside by SpongeBob's increased airing, but at the same time, many agree that the premise of SpongeBob is simply much more interesting. Because of this, the failure of CatDog isn't simply placed on Nickelodeon's decision to air it less than originally planned. A very well documented case are the Angry Beavers, a show that had already found their place on Nickelodeon before our main Sponge started airing. This has been talked about a lot more online than for other shows, as Nickelodeon's dramatic changes in policies around what you can and cannot say affected the production of this show immensely. It even reached the point where the characters couldn't even say "shut up," as this was apparently too mature, while it was completely fine before SpongeBob's sudden success. After butting heads with the censors for a while, the show ultimately came to a close, with the infamous unaired final episode where the Beavers go full meta and talk about how they're just cartoon characters and how their story will be cut short due to the cancellation. If you're curious, you can find the full dialogues for the episode right here on YouTube, but the animation and everything else for the episode was never completed. On a completely different note, Legend of Korra, the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender, was an incredibly successful show that was also mishandled by the network. Korra is a very interesting case study, as the amount of bad decisions are simply confusing, but just to name a few. After a few episodes of Season 3 got leaked, the season got pushed up and aired with little to no warning. Obviously, since a lot of fans simply did not know this was happening, this resulted in lower ratings, which no doubt contributed to their next big decision. The final episodes of Season 3 were quietly taken off the TV schedule and moved to air online, again with essentially no notice. And lastly for Korra, there's been talk about Nickelodeon not exactly being on board about various characteristics of Korra, the LGBT representation, and so on. But there's not a lot of concrete information surrounding this issue. However, based on what happened with the censors on Angry Beavers, it certainly wouldn't be surprising. Maybe the most ridiculous case of Nickelodeon's management of their franchises is the story of Harvey Beaks. The new episode premieres for the final season, instead of being moved online like it was the case for Legend of Korra, were moved to the sister channel of Nickelodeon, Nicktoons, which in the community is essentially considered to be the graveyard for these shows. And not surprisingly, instead of airing Harvey Beaks, the network decided to simply air SpongeBob reruns. No matter what your opinion on this particular series was, it's clear that a very large part of its cancellation was simply because of Nickelodeon's mismanagement. Airing it less and less, and then moving it to a lot less popular channel obviously resulted in lower ratings, which ultimately gave them a reason to cancel it. And the crazy part is that the network never even told Carl Harvey Greenblatt, the creator of Harvey Beaks, that the show's unaired episodes would be moved. He found out just like the fans, in a Twitter post. Not only is it unprofessional, but also very disrespectful toward the artist. And finally, SpongeBob even managed to wipe out Fairly OddParents. The situation around this Nicktoon is a lot more complicated, however. As mentioned previously, the show had already experienced multiple cancellations. There was also controversy around Butch Hartman, the creator of the Fairly OddParents, and it's generally not a great idea to have two shows that are primarily comedy-based on the same channel for such a long period of time, with both SpongeBob and the Fairly OddParents going into their 10th seasons. If you go by Hartman's word, Nickelodeon tried to make his show more and more like SpongeBob, but after he refused to do so, pointing out that a show based around the sponge already exists, Nick just decided to pull the plug on it. While opinion is split on whether this was indeed the case for Hartman's show or not, this is indeed a trend for Nickelodeon. After the surprising and unmatched success of SpongeBob, the network played it a lot more safe with their programming, and generally tried to make most of their projects just like SpongeBob. Many have described SpongeBob as the Mickey Mouse of Nickelodeon, but I'd argue this is not the case, as with time, Mickey just became the face of Disney and starred in less and less projects himself. On the contrary, SpongeBob became both the face and the main star for Nickelodeon. The trend at the network was that your show wasn't cancelled because it was doing bad. It was cancelled because it wasn't doing as good as SpongeBob, which is simply baffling when you look at their decision making. The marketing behind SpongeBob eclipsed any other show. The network themselves constantly hamstrung other series, further lowering their ratings and bolstering SpongeBob's, and so on. Nickelodeon also moved away from narrative-based shows like Avatar. The biggest strength for our sponge that has helped him remain on top for so long are the constant reruns. For a show like Korra, missing an episode or a completely new viewer tuning in midway may contribute a lot to people dropping the show, unlike SpongeBob that can be turned on whenever and still be enjoyable. This is likely a reason why during its prime, Nick pushed Fairly OddParents as well. It saw ratings on the level of SpongeBob, and it had the same rerun ability factor. There are countless other shows that have been affected by SpongeBob's success, but these are just a few examples of Nick's baffling management. Looking toward the future, it's difficult to say whether the situation at Nickelodeon will ever change. With time slots still dominated by SpongeBob and so much already invested into the franchise, they really have little motivation to change. In the next few years, we'll likely only see an expansion of the franchise in the form of various spin-offs, which will bring in a whole new wave of interest, and more importantly for Nickelodeon, another opportunity for merchandise. To answer the main question of this video, how did SpongeBob change animation forever? We've talked extensively about how it affected Nickelodeon in particular, but what about the wider industry? After the worldwide phenomenon that was Hillenburg's creation, many companies in the industry tried to get a piece of the pie, and oriented their cartoons to be more and more like SpongeBob. This of course hurt the industry when it comes to new and interesting ideas, as experimentation with the medium was now considered as unnecessary risk. During the past few years, however, independent artists have been able to showcase their work, which has prompted various networks to reconsider their thoughts on creative storytelling. Shows like Gravity Falls show that narrative-based animated series can still draw in a massive audience. Primal showed the world that highly abstract and experimental animated shows can also captivate its audience. And even Netflix's Castlevania, a video game adaptation, blew expectations out of the water. Returning to Nickelodeon, after Avatar: The Last Airbender and the originally very mismanaged Legend of Korra was put onto Netflix in 2020, the already thriving community saw another massive influx of viewers. This showed Nickelodeon that these series still hold up, and that these franchises can still be used to tell wonderful stories. Classics like Rugrats are now getting revivals as well, so the thinking at Nickelodeon may finally be changing as well. No matter what happens in this turbulent industry, one can be said for sure. Steven Hillenburg managed to create a universe that had the power to captivate the world for decades. And while the network's actions around this franchise are questionable, SpongeBob and Hillenburg have managed to do something that cannot be overlooked. They managed to bring together so many people, regardless of their beliefs, of all ages, all ethnicities, all over the world, in their joint love for this underwater sponge and the world it inhabits. As someone who has grown up with SpongeBob, I'll be forever grateful for the years and years of entertainment this series has and will continue to provide. And that's the video. This is the first documentary sort of video I've really done, so any and all feedback on what you thought, what you think I should improve, and generally anything at all is very much welcome. I hope you learned something or at least found it entertaining. As usual, all the social media links are below, along with some additional reading. But other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.